From the outside, the family workshop looked like a legacy. From the inside, it was a contrast study that anyone paying attention could read like a ledger. Adrian always arrived late, usually mid-morning, when the light was good and the dust had settled. He stepped carefully across the concrete floor, Italian loafers never quite touching the grit, as if sawdust were a personal insult. His MBA hung on him like a badge of immunity. He talked in buzzwords, synergy, scaling, pivoting, words that floated above the work without ever landing on it. When he shook hands, they were soft, damp in that way hands get when they've only known keyboards and conference rooms. He stood in the middle of the workshop and gestured, pointing at problems he couldn't fix, solutions he didn't understand. Adrian wasn't stupid. He was something worse in a place like this. Untested. He was the incompetent heir, polished and positioned, expected to inherit gravity without ever learning weight. Haley was already there when the lights came on. Her day started at 5 a.m. before the city woke, before anyone could praise or notice. She prepared the glue pot by feel, checked humidity levels without looking at the gauge, and ran her hands over raw wood the way some people read Braille. Her palms were a topographical map of mistakes, old chemical burns from finishing agents, calluses from match-striking motions repeated thousands of times. She could identify oak species by smell alone, tell you where it grew, how it would age, how it would fail if rushed. Haley didn't talk much. She worked. She was restoring a heritage library on a $3.6 million contract, a job that required precision, patience, and an almost religious respect for material. She was doing the real work. And because of that, she was invisible. Their father, Samuel, loved standing in front of the finished pieces. His face was on the brochure, smiling with the confidence of a founder. He spoke with authority, but it was a hollow kind, earned once, spent endlessly. Samuel valued appearance over competence. He liked the idea of leadership more than the labor of it, and Adrian fit neatly into that fantasy. Their mother, Cynthia, kept the books and curated the image. She was financially literate, socially ambitious, and deeply complicit. She knew exactly where the money went, into smoothing Adrian's failures, into funding his crypto investments that evaporated as quickly as they were announced. She enabled favoritism with a careful smile, telling herself it was balance, that Haley didn't need help. Cynthia understood numbers. What she refused to understand was consequence. Haley was the load-bearing wall. There's a concept in psychology called the glass child. Traditionally, it describes the healthy sibling of a sick or disabled child, the one everyone looks through because they demand nothing. In business families, the pattern mutates. The glass child becomes the invisible workhorse. Haley held up the roof. Solid. Reliable. She never cracked, never complained. Because she was essential, she was unnoticed. Infrastructure doesn't get thanked. It only gets blamed when it finally fails. Adrian, by contrast, was the chandelier. Fragile. Expensive. The first thing shown to guests. Shiny enough to distract from the cracks in the ceiling. He needed constant polishing, constant attention. Energy flowed toward him naturally. Not because he contributed, but because he consumed. The family spent their time managing his ego, cushioning his landings, calling his losses learning experiences. The core injustice wasn't cruelty. It was assumption. They assumed Haley would always pay the electric bill, always fix the emergency, always absorb the stress. They mistook her reliability for a lack of ambition, her silence for consent. They looked right through her because, as Haley would later realize with a clarity that hurt more than anger, they knew she wouldn't move soft hands versus scarred ones. Italian loafers against sawdust. A chandelier that dazzled and a wall that held everything up, and for years, no one questioned which one mattered more. Because the lights were still on, and the roof hadn't fallen yet, the truth didn't arrive with a scream or a confrontation. It arrived quietly, the way structural failures always do. Hidden until the pressure reveals them. Haley had known something was wrong for years, but the confirmation came in fragments. A misplaced comment from her mother about, when Adrian officially takes over. A contract renewal discussion where her name never appeared. Then finally, the conversation that wasn't meant for her to hear. 3 years. That's how long they had known Adrian couldn't run the joinery. He didn't know a chisel from a screwdriver, couldn't read grain direction, couldn't diagnose a warp before it ruined a panel. And they knew it. They also knew something else. If Haley was told the truth, she would leave, so the secret wasn't accidental. It was strategic. They let her believe she was earning an inheritance, that her early mornings and chemical burns were building toward ownership. In reality, they were fattening the calf for the golden child, using her labor to stabilize the business until Adrian could step into a finished, profitable shell. Reliability became a resource to be mined. Silence became consent, at least in their minds. That night, Haley stayed in the workshop long after everyone else had gone to bed. The lights hummed overhead as she began to catalog what surrounded her. Every tool told a story. The Lee Nielsen chisels she'd bought when the budget was too tight. The Japanese pull saws ordered with bonuses she never took. Custom planes purchased one at a time over a decade, because quality, like trust, was something she paid for herself. Prototypes sat on shelves, designs sketched late at night, refined after 12-hour days. A life built on a foundation of lies. Her father's voice echoed in her head, something he used to say to apprentices when he still pretended to teach. Good joinery relies on tension and pressure. Apply too much to the wrong point, and the wood doesn't bend. It snaps. Standing there in the midnight silence, Haley finally snapped. Not outwardly. She didn't storm into her parents' bedroom or demand explanations. That would have been emotional. And she was done being emotional. Instead, she waited until 2 a.m., when the house was completely silent. Then she went to work. Phase 1 was physical. She didn't steal a single thing belonging to oak and iron. She took only what was hers. Each chisel wrapped carefully. Each saw oiled and stored. Every custom plane she'd purchased with her own savings packed with the same precision she used on heirloom pieces. Ownership boundaries were respected. Legal lines were clean. Phase 2 was intellectual. Haley accessed the office computer and paused, not to delete company data. She knew better than that. Legal protection mattered. Instead, she opened a single folder. Haley's custom designs. Inside were CAD files, blueprints, Victorian restoration templates, and high-end joinery systems she'd developed on her own time. She copied them, then removed them from the server. Backups were wiped. It was her intellectual property, created after hours, unpaid, uncredited. And she left behind a quiet challenge. If Adrian was the owner, surely he could design his own templates. Phase 3 was the exit. The workshop key was placed dead center on her father's desk. On top of it, a yellow sticky note with 5 words written neatly. Good luck with the sawdust. She walked out the back door and drove away without looking back. The breakdown began at 7:15 a.m. A text from her mother. Client here early. Where are you? A missed call from her father. Then 3 more, each closer together. By 8:30, the tone shifted from annoyed to frantic. Haley, pick up. Can't find blueprints for library restoration. Haley stopped playing games. She was already sitting in a diner by then, a black coffee cooling in front of her. For the first time in 15 years, her hands were clean. No dust under her fingernails. No glue residue in the creases. The absence felt wrong. There was a strange ache in her palms and forearms. Phantom pain. Her body was conditioned to the push of a plane, the resistance of wood. Being idle felt like an injury. But the pain wasn't from losing the work. It was the feeling of a toxic limb finally being cut off. Hurt, yes. But the gangrene was gone. Her phone continued to vibrate on the table. Haley wrapped her clean hands around the mug and realized something fundamental had changed. She wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. She had already left. 6 months earlier, they had gone out to celebrate Adrian's MBIT. Was one of those restaurants chosen more for what it signaled than what it served. Low lighting, heavy silverware, wine glasses that caught the light just enough to feel expensive. Adrian sat at the head of the table without anyone asking him to. No one corrected it either. He swirled his red wine slowly, performing thoughtfulness, performing authority, and began explaining the future. Haley listened as he lectured her about the inefficiency of her methods. Restoration, he said, didn't scale. Craft was a bottleneck. The future was automation. CNC routers, composite materials, imported wood that could be standardized and optimized. He stacked buzzwords like building blocks. Scaling, automation, supply chain leverage. He smiled when he said her work was analog and quaint, like something charming but obsolete. Restoration was nostalgia, he insisted. Mass production was progress. Their parents nodded along, entranced. Their father watched Adrian with a kind of reverence Haley had never seen directed at her, not even on the day she landed the Heritage Library contract. Their mother leaned in, eyes bright, absorbing every word as if it were prophecy. It was more than favoritism. It was something deeper, more dangerous. This was the Dunning-Kruger effect in real time. Neither of her parents knew how to do high-end joinery. They'd managed the business side for years. Contracts, payroll, marketing, but they lacked the competence to evaluate Adrian's incompetence. They couldn't tell the difference between confidence and capability. His buzzwords sounded like strategy. His spreadsheets looked like mastery. They genuinely believed that making wood bend without breaking was the easy part. Management, they thought, was the real work. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson in reality. Back in the present, the gaslighting started almost immediately. Her mother's messages came first. "You're hurting the family. This is incredibly selfish." Then the sharpest blade. "Your father is under so much stress. It's affecting his heart." Haley recognized it instantly. The weaponization of health, the unspoken accusation that boundaries were a medical event that Adrian's messages followed. "Stop being such a drama queen. We don't need your little tools anyway. We're pivoting to a new supplier." And then the threat, clumsy and loud. "Send the passwords for the client database or I'll sue you for theft." Theft. Haley stared at the word, almost amused. Accused of stealing intellectual property that had lived in her head, her hands, her muscle memory. She didn't reply. She didn't defend herself. One by one, she blocked the numbers. There was no guilt about her father's stress. Stress was the byproduct of poor management. He had appointed a manager who thought pine was a hardwood. She finished her coffee, paid the bill, and stepped into the cold morning air. The assessment was brutal but honest. She was unemployed, professionally homeless, completely alone, and not afraid. She knew something they didn't. Wood doesn't lie, and neither does the market. For 48 hours there was silence. Long enough to feel deliberate. Long enough to build pressure. Then her phone rang. IT wasn't family, IT was Richard, the lead architect on the Heritage Library project. The man holding the keys to the $3.6 million contract that was supposed to fund Adrian's new era. Richard was standing in the workshop when he called. Haley could hear it immediately, the hollow acoustics, the wrong kind of echo. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Adrian, he said, had tried to explain away a mistake. Catastrophic one. He'd used a chemical stain on 200-year-old oak shelving instead of the traditional beeswax finish specified in the restoration plan. Called it cost-efficient. Said it would modernize the look. "I walked out," Richard said flatly. Haley closed her eyes. "I'm sorry, Richard. I don't work there anymore." "I gathered that," he replied, voice calm in a way that told her he'd already connected the dots. Then he said something that shifted the ground beneath her. "I didn't hire a building, Haley. I didn't hire a logo. I hired you." He paused. "You're the only person in this state who knows how to restore those shelves without destroying them. If you aren't there, the contract is void." She felt the weight of it, the validation and the pressure in equal measure. "I don't have a shop," she said. "I don't even have space." "Find one," Richard said. "I'll give you an advance on materials. But I need to know right now." His voice sharpened just enough. "Are you a woodworker, or were you just an employee?" It was a challenge and a lifeline wrapped together. Haley drove without thinking, past streets she knew by heart, until she reached the edge of town. There was an old barn there, drafty and forgotten, something she'd passed 1,000 times without seeing. The siding was warped, the wind whistled through gaps, and parts of the floor were still dirt. But it was dry. And it was empty. She called the owner and leased it on the spot, using the last of her savings. The next 3 days blurred together, leveling the floor, wiring a generator, working in freezing conditions where her breath fogged the air. She set up her workbench with numb fingers, hands remembering what to do even when the rest of her felt hollowed out. When she made the first cut into fresh timber, the sound stopped her cold. It wasn't the sound of labor. It was the sound of ownership. The administrative work came next, the unglamorous backbone of independence. Evenings were spent filing for liability insurance, registering an LLC, locking down vendor contracts. She asked a high school friend, now in commercial real estate law, to review the barn lease just to be safe. Standard title check. Routine. Boring. 2 days later, her phone rang. Her friend's voice dropped into a professional whisper, the tone used when delivering bad news. He'd run a conflict check against Oak and Iron, looking for non-compete clauses tied to the land. "I found something you need to see," he said. Haley expected a zoning issue, a forgotten permit. Instead, she was looking at a foreclosure notice in the making. The ownership transfer 3 years ago hadn't been the only secret. 6 months earlier, while Haley kept the shop solvent, Adrian had convinced their parents to leverage the commercial property as collateral. The land, the building, her grandfather's legacy. They'd taken out a massive high-interest business loan and wired the funds to a tech growth fund. She recognized the name instantly. It had been in the news. A cryptocurrency exchange that imploded the month before. The money was vaporized. The debt remained. The asset they thought they were protecting was a ticking time bomb. Oak and Iron wasn't just poorly run. It was technically insolvent. The mortgage couldn't be serviced without the revenue from the very contracts Haley had taken with her. She sat in her car, staring at the photocopy of the lien, a cold chill running through her that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She saw the alternative timeline with brutal clarity. If she'd stayed. If she'd accepted the generous offer to manage things later. She would have spent the next 20 years working to pay off her brother's gambling debt. An engine on a sinking ship, shoveling coal while they steered straight into the iceberg. The anger evaporated, replaced by something else entirely. Relief. Profound and terrifying. She hadn't just walked away from a job. She'd escaped a burning building moments before the roof collapsed. Winter settled hard over the valley. The kind of cold that didn't announce itself but simply arrived and stayed. The barn wasn't insulated properly yet. Haley worked in a heavy wool coat, breath misting in the air as she shaped cornices for Richard's library. Her hands moved steadily, the rhythm familiar and grounding. The cold kept her sharp. The silence kept her focused. In conditions that would have broken her once, she found herself thriving. The sound of a car crunching over frozen gravel broke that silence. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Samuel stood in the doorway, framed by gray light, looking 10 years older than he had a month ago. His shoulders slumped, the posture of a man whose authority had finally run out. He didn't look at Haley at first. His eyes went straight to the bench, flawless dovetails. Grain matched perfectly. Work that spoke for itself. He recognized it immediately. The quality that used to pay his bills. His voice was raspy when he spoke. He'd missed a deadline for the Johnson account, he said. The bank was calling every day. Adrian was overwhelmed. Haley kept planing Walnut, a shaving curling away like a ribbon. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, her voice steadied. He stepped closer, desperation softening his pride. They needed her back. Her mother was sick with worry. He was willing to make a deal. She could return as shop manager. 10% equity. He said it like it was a gift. 10%, Haley. That's generous. The audacity of it landed cleanly. 10% of a crater. He wanted her labor to pay off the loan that had destroyed the business, all while reporting to the brother who'd signed the papers. I know about the loan, Dad. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth but no sound came out. I know Adrian leveraged the land, she continued, calm and factual, lethal in its precision. I know the money's gone. I know the shop is worthless. He pleaded then. They could save it, he said. With her hands, with her speed. They could work their way out of it. He tried one last weapon. It was her heritage. That was the final cut. The guilt, the obligation, the desperate need for approval. All of it fell away. Saving them would mean destroying herself, infecting her new life with their gangrene. I'm not the heir, Dad, she said quietly. I never was. And I'm not your savior. She picked up a chisel and met his eyes. I'm the competition. And I'm winning. He stood there for a long moment, a ghost in the graveyard of his own making. Then he turned and walked back into the cold. Haley didn't watch him go. She went back to the wood point 6 weeks later. Oak and iron heritage joinery went to auction. Haley didn't go to watch the foreclosure. She didn't go to gloat. She went for one reason only. The auction was held in a cold, echoing warehouse. Industrial saws went first, then dust collection systems, then delivery trucks. Strangers bought the infrastructure of her childhood for pennies on the dollar. Near the exit, her parents huddled in coats, arguing quietly with Adrian. They looked small, people who had gambled a legacy on a buzzing sound and lost. Lot 42 came up near the end. Her grandfather's bench, it was heavy, scarred maple, covered in burns and gouges. Too old. Too analog. Not worth much to anyone else. But it was the bench her grandfather had built by hand, the place where she'd learned to cut her first dovetail. Haley raised her paddle. $300. She arranged delivery to the barn the next morning and walked out without speaking to her family. She didn't need their apology. She didn't need their acknowledgement. Closure wasn't in their words. It was in her actions. The barn isn't cold anymore. Radiant heating hums quietly beneath the floor, installed last month when survival finally gave way to stability. The air is warm even in winter. This isn't a place you endure anymore. It's a professional operation. She has a team now. 3 apprentices, each learning the way she did. Hands first, ego last. They're taught early that the quality of the joint matters more than the speed of the cut. That precision isn't slow. It's honest. What Haley teaches them isn't written on the walls, but it's present in every correction, every pause before a blade touches wood. It's what her grandfather taught her. Respect the material, and it will hold you up. Not the corrupted version of legacy she grew up under, obsessed with titles and appearances, but the real one, passed hand to hand through work. Her grandfather's bench sits in the center of the shop now. Not against a wall. Not tucked away. The scarred maple surface is the literal and symbolic heart of the space. Every project moves past it. Every apprentice learns on it. It's a reminder of where she came from and why she stayed true. Legacy, she knows now, isn't something you inherit. It's something you build day by day with your own 2 hands. She's not the heir of a name, she's the heir of the sawdust, the sweat, and the silence of good work. And for the first time in her life, she knows exactly what she's worth. If you've ever had to walk away to find your value, or if you're the one holding everything together while others take the credit, share your story below. You aren't alone.